Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, hello. I am happy to welcome you to our third Responsible Webinar. My name is Olga Mashkina. I am a senior researcher at Action, a research consulting company in France, and I'm also the coordinator of the Responsible project. It's a Horizon 2020 project on ocean literacy. And today we are at the third webinar, and we are going to talk about linking the oceans to our consumption habits and talk about consumers. Today we are, no. How do I change my slide? There's always a problem. Okay. For those of you who haven't been to our first two webinars, I tell you a little bit of the background of why we decided to have these webinars and why ocean literacy. And ocean literacy is a new term, but for all challenges, and you usually can recognize it by the different names, such as awareness raising, capacity building, or education. This term doesn't translate very well to all the languages, but originally it comes from the US. It's from science and education background. It was mentioned in the Galway Statement on Transatlantic Cooperation and has become a focus of several research projects of Horizon 2020, such as Sea Change, Responsible, and Our. And because of the increasing importance of the ocean literacy in science education, training, and policy, we see this the ocean literacy making its way in different levels of maritime policy, also to ensure the blue growth sustainable through many initiatives throughout Europe and the United States and basically all over the world. And we would like that these webinars can help different audiences to understand why is it important to become ocean literate. And I will speak about it in a moment. What do we think ocean literate person is? And for example, when you think, do you think you're ocean literate? Who we can call an ocean literate person? It's when we started our project, we had many discussions. How do we define that person? And as a basic definition, we took the definition that the ocean literate person is aware of the importance of the ocean and of its current health. He understands the human's influence on the ocean and vice versa, and knows what to do to protect the ocean and to seize the opportunity that ocean offers. And it is an issue for everybody. Children, parents, citizens, consumers, economic actors, civil society, policymakers, scientists, everybody is responsible. Everybody should be ocean literate. Everybody should know and understand our connection to the ocean, what is the link between our actions, our decisions, our behavior, and what it does to the ocean. Now, like I said, this is the third webinar already, and what we're trying to achieve with this. We're trying to share the different views and challenges and best practices on ocean literacy. So we want to know who needs to be ocean literate, how, and what needs to be the basics of the knowledge. And of course, with these different discussions, we are trying to collectively build the ocean literacy in Europe in a most effective way. So we want to engage as many different parts of society. And in general, to say we would like that our community of ocean literacy practitioners get widened, so more people get on board of this issue. So now again, for those who haven't been using Zoom before, you can see that all the participants are muted as a default, except host and speakers. And you can use the chat button to ask questions. This is not moderated, and when you do this, all the participants receive your message, including our panelists and myself. You can also use question and answer button. This text you enter will come directly to us, to panelists and the host, and not all the participants will be able to see it. You can also raise hand if you have a question or you want to speak, but because the timing of the webinar is so short, we encourage you to use it. We were not sure if we can give you the floor, and we invite you to ask, also to write a small message to us about why do you want to speak or what do you want to do it. If possible, we will give you a possibility. So now, today with us, I am very happy to introduce you that we have 3 wonderful speakers today. It's busy time during this month for all of us that engage with the ocean and not many different conferences going around. And I'm happy to introduce Florence. Florence comes from France. She's working with Nausicca Aquarium, and she has been involved in the Mr. Goodfish initiative. It is you'll hear more about it in the seminar. We're also happy that Julian Guerrero was able to join us. He will be talking, giving you examples from the SurfRider perspective. He's been a manager of the SurfRider chapter in Finland in Brittany. And then we're also happy to have with us Stella Huenlänmaa from Finland. We go from France to Finland today, from WWF. And Stella will bring you the experience of how they dealt with consumers in the Baltic Sea about the meat production and eating habits, which maybe some of you, it would be interesting, as we have fish and meat and all related to the sea. So welcome on board, and we continue to our questions. So as always, our webinar we structure around 3 questions. So the first one is we would like to know what is so specific about working with consumers. In our previous webinars it was children, and in the further ones we'll look at the businesses and the other actors. Second question is, so okay, we know something about consumers, but how do we change consumer behavior? What is it? What is effective and what is not? What we should avoid doing, not to get consumers feeling too guilty or not happy. And question 3, where should we put our efforts in making future campaigns or reaching consumers? So our future plans. So question 1, what is the specificity of working with consumers? I'm sure we all are consumers, all in the audience, we all at some point regardless of what we do in our professional life, we are consumers, and we are very different. Our consumer habits depend on age, on our income level, what we can afford, our culture, what we like to cook because of our grandparents, our great-grandparents' heritage, what is accessible, what we can find in our shops around us, what is cool or trendy, our maybe some social educational backgrounds. I heard that scientists who are more educated, they sometimes change their preferences for consumers different from the other ones. And of course, it all depends on level of awareness. So some people, some consumers are already, let's say, much more aware than the others. Now, by saying all of this, I also want to point out that nowadays it's even more than before. We feel the impact of globalization, so that the consumers are actually much more disconnected from the sea than before. So because in previous times, people lived by the sea, they eat seafood, they see where it comes from, their family of fishermen. It's they deal with it every day. Nowadays, we eat. We know some things only by these plastic products that we get, because or not let's say not so directly connected products, and it's the times become like this. With the consumers, one thing that is when we talk about information is what unites all of them is that they, as a consumers, as a group, before they buy something, they would need to look at the good quality and price ratio. So there's an economic part and the other part. And I wanted to point out, which is obvious to many of you, that the consumer actually has quite a lot of power and influence, because when they put their demands, or when they buy or do not buy something, they could affect the quality and quantity and type of materials, whether the product's been certified or has carrying the label. They can choose the origins, they can decide, or they can influence to what happens to the product at the end of its life cycle. Does it get recycled? Does it get utilized? What happens to it? And it's when consumers have the power to demand changes in all of this. But questions remains: do they know enough to make these responsible choices and put these demands to businesses and policy? And here I come to the questions: what do they need to know? What types of knowledge would help them to link their consumption habits to the health of the sea? And what is lacking in the current information? And then I would like to bring your attention to the question, how do we influence the behavior? Is information enough? So now I would like the audience to actually take part. Because I would like you all to act like consumers, well, like you usually are, and to choose to show me 3 criteria that you use when you go to shop for fish or seafood. Let me initiate the poll, and the panelists are allowed to vote as well. Okay. You can see that we have prepared a few choices for you. So what are the 3 main criteria? You can use 3. Just the price, origin, presence of the label. Does the size matter to you? Seasonality of the fish. Recommendations of your friends. Or maybe you get inspired by the TV cooking shows or advertisement. Maybe you don't buy fresh fish at all. You just buy the one that is already pre-cooked and pre-packaged. Or maybe others. I see. I think we've now everybody voted, probably besides me, and I can end the polling and share the results with you. So I think in the audience today we have people who actually really care about the origin, or most of you put origin of the product as one of the deciding factors. And second biggest category is the presence of a label. Price coming into the 3rd place, And seasonality is number 4. Now, quite a few people voted for other. I would be curious to know what other things you consider. You can actually write it in your in both channels, in question and answer, so in chat. And I'm also curious to know, maybe from I would be curious to know what is it. But looks like we have a very environmentally aware audience. I will now close the poll, and to sum it up, in fact, my numbering of the choices here is not reflecting what we have from our group. So origin is number 1, quality is quality and price would be in the other sides. Now, this is interesting because it still poses the question: how much information does it give about the impact of the choice? And here I'd like to share with you a bit of the findings from our project, because we have looked at different, let's say, environmental challenges, but in most of it we found out that the knowledge on how marine ecosystem work, economic and technological impact was lacking for all of it. So public was not really aware of how marine ecosystem works, and also how the, let's say, processing, catching, the economic part of the situation works. And for general public, for consumers, mainly they received some diffused information about the state and the pressure. And mostly the channels that were used were TV and social media. So it's basically to say how bad situation is, and what have led to that. And in our research, we found out that we need a much better coverage of knowledge in all segments. So we need to know more about the drivers, like, for example, what drive the consumer, the production, or the need to have more seafood, and in each different region, crashes, activities, impact, and most importantly, response, because what can be done to help this, because this links very much to the emotional drivers, and this is where the behavior can take place. So these different topics that I said we looked at, they're different. So, for example, when we looked at plastics and microplastics, the amount of information skyrocketed in the last 2 years, and a lot of campaigns, a lot of things. Is just impossible to name all what happened, which highlighted again mostly the state and the pressure, with some campaigns of course showing the response, but a lot on this side. But the good thing is it's amazing growth of information. For fish and seafood, the work has been long ongoing, both on all the consumers and producers and shops. So it's again, the link between the impact and response is weak, but I think it's a growing amount of campaigns is showing it, and I'm sure today we will learn more about it. And in eutrophication, it's quite a new subject. We found out quite a few people were not yet aware that the meat-eating habits can have an impact on the sea. But again, today we will learn more. So now we get to the most interesting part, because I'm sure you're already tired of listening to my voice, and I would like to ask now our panelists to share the experiences. Maybe tell a bit of what sort of target group you were working with, what consumer habits you try to change it, and most important, maybe what type of information did you provide or give in your campaign. So maybe Florence, we can start with you and with your experience with Mr. Goodfish.
Thank you very much. So yes, for us, our target group at the beginning was really the general public, so the general consumers, because Mr. Goodfish is a European project which has been launched by aquariums in Europe, in Italy, Spain, and France in 2010. And the objective was to launch a campaign on sustainable seafood consumption. But when we start to launch that, many professionals came to us to ask us to give them information so that they would be able to be multipliers and to help the consumer to choose the right fish. So that's why we've decided to target the consumer, but also the professional, which are selling fish, so restaurants and fishmongers. And that's why we have separate target groups, the general public, in the aquariums, in several communication activity. We are doing schools and things like that, but also the professionals that are, I think, are key people to help the consumer to choose the right fish.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Florence. That's very targeted answer, exactly what I was looking for. Maybe now, Stella, you can tell us about what was it a big difference in when you were working with consumers on the meat consumption?
Sure. So yeah, as you said, what I work on is related to food and to our consumption choices. And so the message we try to get across to consumers is what we eat is one of the most important daily choices that we make for the planet. And this is related to several different environmental impacts, but oceans are a good example of this. So, I mean, for example, in the Baltic context, agriculture is the biggest single source of nutrients into the Baltic Sea. So to get a healthy Baltic Sea, what we really need is to look at what it is that we're consuming in the area and, of course, producing as well. And so, yeah, one of the tools that we've created for consumers are the WWF meat guides. What the guides do is try and encourage consumers to eat less and better meat. Same as Florence, we also have several different target groups, actually, so that we don't only work with consumers, we also work with companies, we work with producers, we work with producers' unions. So there's a lot of different types of work that we do, but maybe I'll focus a little bit more on the consumer work, of course. Mm-hmm. And we actually, I mean, we give information almost on 3 different levels. So one is we want to get across the message that food actually has environmental impacts and impacts on the sea, because as you said, this is something that a lot of people don't know. And then the second level is that meat has bigger environmental impacts than other food, and that's why we're asking people to reduce. And then the third question is, what is then better meat? If you are eating meat, what are better choices? And that's what the guides answer. And in terms of has that been enough, we've actually done some research here in Finland. I can't say, of course, that it's only us that has been part of this shift, but there has been a really big change in awareness in the last 2 years because of this big discussion that's going on the theme. So actually 40% of consumers now say that they want to reduce the environmental impact of their diets by moving towards more plant-based diets. So that's a great result.
I think so too. This is a very good result. I think there's a lot of, like you say, a lot of people are working on bringing awareness, and this is one of the good outcomes of our work, that it is growing, the amount of people who are more aware and who want to change their habits. I can now ask Julian. We go a bit from the food consumption to the other type of consumption. And I want to ask you, as working in a SurfRider, what what did you account in your campaigns when you work with people? What type of people? What do you tell them? Is it enough? And
okay, well, first of all, hello everybody. Thank you. Well, that's many questions.
All in one.
Basically, our target groups is the general public. As everyone knows, SurfRider started in the US and with surfers. So basically, water sport players. But little by little, it went. It became wider than that, and now it targets any kind of people who enjoys the presence of the ocean, who just wants to benefit from a healthy ocean. Even people who live far from the sea. There is a very active SurfRider chapter in Paris because, of course, the rivers are linked to the sea, and what is maybe thrown in the Seine River in Paris goes to the ocean. So, we really target the general public, adults, and especially children, of course. And we realized that, most people don't want to harm nature, but sometimes they do it not on purpose. For the reasons that we have already mentioned, just because they don't know it, they are not well informed enough. And so our goal is basically that people don't harm nature against their will, against their own will. And for that purpose, we want to let them know more about the impacts of like cosmetics that sometimes have microplastics, or the bad impacts of cigarette butts thrown in the environment. Some people think that every drain in the street, that everything that goes in a drain in the street is treated, but it's not the case. Sometimes it goes straight to the sea. So just little things like that, where people don't know something or believe something in a wrong way, and we want to spot a new light on those topics, so that then people can change their behavior themselves, because I didn't know it was like that, so I'm not going to do that anymore.
That's you pointed out a very interesting thing that I would like that we elaborate a bit more in the next few minutes, because in fact, yes, you know something, but do you do something about it? And how this link between information and my action is very, very intriguing part. I now would like to thank you, and I go back to what else I wanted to share with you. Let's see. Yes, I would like now to see if our audience has any questions about it at this point, or if not, we leave some of the questions to the next part. You're welcome to write them in the question and answers or in the chat. And yet no questions, we will progress to the next part. Maybe there was one question. A comment. Okay. Yes, it's true. This is exactly what we will be talking in this next part. And my second question that I put is, what is effective when you engage with consumers in general? But in fact, it's to open up the question to you about this link. Okay, I know, why don't I act? So now I would like to invite you to do some exercise with us to see if you actually know some things, if you are ocean literate. So ready? We have the poll. So first one, we would like to know if you know what is the approximate % of cigarette butts in the overall debris found on the beaches. And you just have to guess percent. It is between 5, 16, 32, 45, or more than 50. Take your guesses. If you progressed with the first one, you can go into the second question and the third. Well, I understand it might be challenging. You will see at the end the results. It is anonymous, so even if you don't know something, we wouldn't know. Just make your guesses. Some of you who are sitting next to computers could even already probably type to get the right knowledge. Okay, we have maybe a few more people who could still cast the votes. One more person. Yes, okay. So I will close it and I will share the results with you. So for the first question, the correct answer was 32. And looks like, in fact, in our audience, more people thought it was even higher. So you are even more aware. And actually, maybe when I said it's approximately 32, because the amount that I had was from some years ago, and I'm sure it's been much more cigarette butts which has been thrown in between. So more or less right. The second part. What is the average percent of plastic found in the fish? Here again, if it's an average, the correct answer is 18, and I see that in our audience, people have voted for 25 being the right answer, which is again, I think shows our audience is much more aware of the issues. And here, which is the microplastics? Can you recognize them? In fact, all of them, besides the last two, are the microplastics. So here you could have put all of them except the last two. I stop sharing the results, and I will just want to tell you that. Okay, now you know the right answers. So what? Does it change anything in my everyday behavior? Do I do anything different from what I did before I knew this information? Correctly or incorrectly, this is the question. If it's 32 or 45, does it make a difference to me in my behavior change? And here, for those of you who haven't been to the previous webinars, I want to show a little bit of the theory that there is a lot of research in psychology which explains this phenomenon when how do I make decisions, how I make change behavior. And I would not go through all of them. It's just for you to know that there are several, and many of them have knowledge as part of the model, and some actually look at much more complex system. So, for example, in the maybe just to highlight that the last two, the theory of cognitive dissonance and theory of change, we have looked at it quite a lot in our project, and this helps us to understand how, like, for example, you know that you need to stop smoking, and you know you should be doing something which is bad for your health, but you still don't do it. And what are these factors that keep you from doing it, and how to overcome these barriers? And the theory of change explains how you should look first of what sort of change you desire, or what would expect, and then how to bring it into the steps to reach that change. So this complex diagram is from the psychology and shows, I don't know if you can see very well, what are different factors, internal, external, that and the barriers that keep you from, for example, in this case, is pro-environmental behavior. So how do I stop my old behavior patterns? I don't have many incentives. This just to show you that there's a lot of literature, a lot of interesting research going on, and many people have already tried to look at this phenomena. The issue is not new. Luckily, in this last, I don't know how many, 50 years, we have moved quite a lot in the pro-environmental behavior of consumers. So it works. Now, what we can take out of this is to understand that knowledge is only a precondition. So information we receive, it's only precondition, but it's not sufficient for the behavioral change. And from examples from literature, we also know that the effectiveness of campaigns that relied only on information is very low. You obviously need something else to go together with it. So it's important that you capture your audience, you gain their involvement, you help them to overcome skepticism. And the last but not the least is this has to be easy to do. It has to have no extra costs. So even if I would love to choose free range or bio-organic stuff, which is I just cannot afford, I would not be able to do it. So that's the big challenge. This is just to say that there are different motivating factors and enabling factors. And maybe from this slide for you to take away is that there's important is to have the feedback from your peers, from somebody like the ambassadors or somebody who is really famous, to say, this is easy, I can do it. And it doesn't take much, and it's cool, it's very trendy. And once this has become a social, let's say, background, it's easy to others to follow. Yeah, this is just to continue that this is different ways to look at the barriers and opportunities. And now, in fact, back to our panelists. I'd like to know, what did you do to overcome these barriers? How did you do? I know you have done all kind of innovative, different ways that worked in your case. Maybe you can tell us, because I know that there were some very interesting things that you were doing. We go in the same order. I ask Florence.
Okay, thank you. So for us, what we've decided to do to help the consumer was because we've seen that the consumer always eats the same species. There was a pressure on certain stocks of fish, for example, shrimp, salmon, cod, especially in France. So what we've decided to do is to help them to choose the right fish and offer them alternatives to threatened species, and thus to contribute to reducing human pressure on marine resources. So we've implemented in France scientific committees that meet every 3 months in the different fishing area in the coast of France. And in that scientific committee, we also incorporate fishermen, professionals that are working on fish resources, and also association of consumer. So all together, we can decide what kind of fish we can promote. And this list of recommended species, we try to help the consumer to use it and to change their habits depending on the seasonality. So trying to explain that like for fruits and vegetables, there is season to respect, but for the fish, it's the same. You should be careful of the season. So with this, we really try to help the consumer to know how to prepare fish, how to cook fish, how to eat unknown species, what can they do with unknown fish. And we've decided to work with communication activity like cooking sessions, activities with chefs in TV show, but also in, for example, the Salon de l'Agriculture. It's the biggest manifestation with professionals working on agriculture and fishery, and we are organizing tasting session with the consumer. So we managed to make people eat unknown species that I will never try in their daily life, and just showing that it's easy to prepare and it's really good and the price is really low. Sometimes it helps them to be less afraid of buying new species. So it's really working using the aquarium, the chefs, the TV program, the media to promote and to explain that it's possible to eat fish in the future, but you need to choose the right fish and to be really careful and to try to avoid the pressure on the threatened stocks and to choose unknown species.
Thank you. So it's almost like learning by tasting or learning by eating experience, and I think everybody loves it. It's like the one very, very good approach to consumers. Stella, what about you guys? Did you also do something similar, or was it completely different?
Well, both different and similar. So I will explain the different things that we did to give you a different example. So before we started the campaign here in Finland, we actually reviewed all the research, well, not all the research, but we reviewed research on behavior change and on trends in eating in Finland to see what has been identified. What are the reasons that people have for changing? What are the barriers specifically related to food and related to meat? And we found some really interesting information in there. One is that especially with food and especially with meat, your social circle is really important, just as you mentioned. So you're far more likely to make a change in your eating pattern if someone in your immediate circle or even just outside that is making these kind of changes. So peer support, that's really important. The other thing we found, which I almost hope that we wouldn't have found, and it's a trend that I hope is changing, but still in Finland and in a lot of countries, mothers are actually the gatekeepers to the kitchens. So they buy the food and they cook the food that the family eats. So we took that information in two different ways. We wanted to approach young mothers as a target group because of this gatekeeper status that they have. And we collaborated with bloggers who specifically have audiences of young mothers. And what we asked them to do is give a really personal kind of view on what this means to them. How do they approach this issue? How can they reduce the amount of meat that they eat, and give really tangible examples? So they shared recipes and they had competitions with their viewers or readers. And then the other thing that we do related to peer support, we have a wonderful group of volunteers, young people, and they run their own campaign to other young people surrounding these topics. So they also share personal stories, they run competitions as well, they share recipes, and it's really to have the information come from their peers rather than the organization.
Wow, very, very interesting. Thank you very much. I actually didn't know about the specific target of the mothers and the blogs. So these are the new channels, and I think our audience will also appreciate learning and getting some examples from that. Maybe now I ask Julian, the SurfRider, what were effective? What did you do yourself, or you can bring in also some other examples from.
Well, little by little, we, I'm going to make a comparison with the organic movement, buy more organic and more local, instead of just buying the cheapest thing. It was not obvious, it was not automatic for people for a while, and after several years, because people became more aware of the effects, of the negative effects of their food consumption, they started to accept the idea that, yeah, maybe by paying a little more, they will have a better impact through their food. And little by little, this is being integrated by more and more people. And we are targeting the same phenomenon with packagings. And so for now, people buy things without asking themselves about the packaging and the impact of packaging. But we could, it's just a cultural change, it's just a cultural evolution. We could, when we go run errands, if we hesitate between two things, maybe we can start asking ourselves, which one of those two things has the least amount of single-use plastic? Because, yeah, plastic is a wonderful material, but maybe it's not relevant to use it for single uses. So it's just a habit, intellectual habit that we don't have yet when we go run errands, but little by little we could have it more, just like now we have more the habit of thinking organic or local. Then also reading the labels goes in the same direction than that, like the labels of toothpastes or shower gels, and make sure that there is no microplastic balls in them. And regarding the cigarette butts, because we had a question about that, so far it seems tiny, it seems biodegradable, and it's kind of cool to just throw your cigarette butt out in the street. But we are really advertising the pocket ashtrays. Well, first of all, advertising, promoting throwing your cigarette butt in a trash can, but also there's ashtrays that are not very cool, very trendy yet, but who knows, little by little they might become trendy, and maybe in 10 years or 20 years teenagers will show off in front of their friends with their super pocket ashtray, and that will encourage a good peer pressure.
I think that you already started to think of the future, which we will start imagining in just a few minutes. But just to follow up to say that when you have, for example, the beach cleaning events that SurfRider organized, and this is what I understand, that people can actually see it and touch, and all these questions arise, like maybe I don't need to use that much plastic. So it's a very interesting. For me, it was interesting to see how many people actually get engaged, and does it change something? Because, as you say, seeing it yourself and understanding the link is helping to pose these questions.
Yeah. When we take people on the ground and when they see concretely the things on the beach, even though people kind of know that there are trash on the beach, but when they go and they pick it up and we sort it out and we count it and we weigh it at the end, it really contributes. Raise awareness more than just speeches or TV campaign.
Okay. Well, there are many things we can continue talking about each of your things, Florence.
Yeah, I see a question on the question and answer box.
Okay.
But when you promote the consumption of different fish, don't you have the risks that in the future it will become overfished or overpriced? And it's something you have to keep in mind. And for us, we change the recommendation every 3 months. At every season, we have new scientific committee that meets to be sure that we always adjust the recommendation to the market and to the stocks, and to be sure that we have the data in real time, the scientific data at the real time.
Okay, thank you for answering that. We move to the last part. There's the questions. If there are some more questions from the audience, you can continue asking them. If not immediate, we can move to the last part of it, where I would like us to think about what or where we should put our efforts in the future for work with consumers. We already talked what is effective, what could be challenging, what are the barriers, and I understand that there are some ways to engage right people, to really research your topic, to understand which social circles maybe surrounding this particular audience, what user innovative ways where you involve people in the process, like tasting and eating, and you show them the impacts of the consumption, like really visually show them on the beach, and there is a maybe possibility that their awareness will rise. In the future, what let's say, maybe you can say a little bit, what are the plans to do in your particular case? What do you plan to do in the next few years? And also for us as a project on this research on this topic, what should we take on board?
I think for us there is three way to develop the sustainable seafood consumption. The first one, and I think it's the most important one, is to work with schools and to involve kids and to really make them aware when they are really young, and that it will be something they always have in mind. So we have started working with the Ministry of Education in France, and we are now working with several schools. So we are working with the chef at schools, but also with the teachers. So we've developed educational activities and like a fish style, so where the kids can touch the fish and really understand and see what is a fish, that it's not a square which is white, because there are kids that think fish is like that. So I think really the most important one is to work with schools. The second one for us is to work with supermarkets, because in France it's the major place where the consumer buy their fish. So we've already started with Auchan and Intermarché. So now Mr. Goodfish is presented, and the sustainable fish are lighted in the shops. So it's in 2,000 shops in France. And the third opportunity for us is to develop digital tools. Something really simple, because the consumer has to find the information really quickly and in a really simple way. So we've developed an app, really simple one, with which fish, what kind of fish can I eat, where can I find the fish, and how to cook the fish. So it's really the three really easy way to try to have a better consumption of sustainable seafood products.
Sounds like a very good plan. I think you saw that our webinars have we targeted the school children, the consumers, and the next one is on businesses. I think you guys can fit into all of them. So we're happy that we got to hear from you today on all of these opportunities. Maybe I will ask now Stella to say what's in your opinion is important to take on board, and then maybe we come back to
Sure. So as I said, the awareness in Finland and in some other countries is already increasing on this topic, but of course it's not high enough here either, and there are a lot of other countries where that discussion is not really at the same level. So one key thing that we want to do is expand the work on sustainable diets globally, and also to expand the meat guides that we've developed in Finland and Sweden to other European countries. So that's a very concrete step that we want to take. But in addition, I think one of the most important things that we do already and that we will continue to do in the future is partner with other organizations and partner with companies to bring these messages across and to bring the easier solutions to consumers. So to really make it easy for them to choose the more sustainable option, and maybe also make it difficult to choose the less sustainable one.
Thank you. That's some work ahead. Julian.
Well, maybe it's not going to be very original, but we also want to target kids at school. We want to involve them in some beach cleanups and tell them more about the bad effects of single-use plastic, especially plastic. We want to participate in events, in sport competitions or festivals. We want to create partnerships with the local communities, local councils, and local authorities. See how we could help them if they are facing a specific problem, and also create partnerships with other organizations, because of course we are not the only one working on this field, and it would be just pointless to work totally separately. So we try and build bridges between our respective initiatives. That's for the most part, and basically tell people that try and not have them too traumatized or desperate, and tell them there are some problems, but we are not bad, we are not evil, we all want to make things better. Maybe we haven't found the best way for that yet, but it doesn't mean that we don't want it. So we are not bad, and we should stop thinking that other people are bad because they throw their trash away. It's way more complicated than that. There are many parameters at stake, and if we all try and work towards the desirable goals together, it's gonna make a difference.
Yeah, I think you're summing up some of the points that I'm getting from hearing what you say. Because I think the positive experience, like what Florence was talking about, that when you engage people in tasting and thinking that it's something you do, you enjoy, and it's good for you, good for environment. This is works much better than making people guilty. Mm-hmm. You say many factors. And many people and different consumers, but if we appeal to the goodness in people, it's maybe will work much better than the negative part. If there are some other things that you can think of, what could help you to, what you need to support this sort of things. If there's any, just because I think we're reaching the end of the webinar, just maybe one word, if we were to put efforts, how we can help you to support your work. Like I heard you saying we need more partnerships working with kids, so I think there are the communities which are already working with kids for many years, and perhaps there's some way that to connect better these two groups, or maybe they are not two groups, they are one group.
Yeah, I think everyone has to be actor. I know sometimes consumers say, I will eat the fish that the fisherman bring, and sometimes the fisherman said, I will fish until the consumer are ready to change. So I think it can't be only the professional who have to change, or only the consumer who have to change. It's everyone. The entire chain of custody has a role to play, and everyone has to be actor. And we need to all be involved in that question.
Yeah, we all need to be responsible.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Stella. And we are at the end of our webinar. I just want to give you a small overview that our project, we have made a lot of different tools for different groups of people, and you can look at it. There are many different things that are coming up in the next project, and let us know all the questions you had and you didn't have time to put up. You can still write them, and once we close the webinar, don't forget to write your reflections on the form. It's very short, but you can still leave us some feedback on these questions. Maybe you know of some interesting initiatives, maybe you'd like to be connected with us, and so we invite you to do that. Or, of course, you can also just contact us directly. And we continue our series, and we looking forward to some of you who are interested to join us in the next webinar on the November 8th, when we will talk more from the business perspective. How do we talk to professionals? What is specific about that? So, and with that, I would like to thank again our panelists. Thank you, Florence, Stella, and Julian. And I'd like to thank our audience, and wish you a nice afternoon. And stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.